Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Greg Zweig from Ribbon Communications. And today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the new release of Microsoft Teams. And I'm joined by Kevin Keeler and Tom Arbuthnot. I won't give your biographies, but suffice it to say, two Teams experts with many years of experience across the Microsoft portfolio, particularly as it relates to Teams phones, but all things Teams. And as I said, I'm from Ribbon. We'll talk a little bit. We'll just talk a little bit later about how Ribbon ties into this whole discussion, but we'll save that as a short interlude. I'll turn it over to Tom and Kevin to talk a little bit about what's going on with Teams.
Yeah. So before we dive into kind of the tips and tricks, I wanted just to set the stage. And first and foremost, I know Tom and I are thrilled that Ribbon is sponsoring this. This is a great opportunity. Both Tom and I spend a lot of time keeping up with the latest that's new for Teams, but this is really a great opportunity to go back and curate and try to figure out like what are some of the best new features. So kudos to Ribbon for making this possible. There are 320 million monthly active users of Teams, and that's just that was just updated a few days ago, October 24th, and the whatever Microsoft's Q1 FY 2024 results, right? So if we go to the next slide or the next bullet, Tom? Yeah. Okay. I think I said yesterday, but it's today.
It's today,
so Copilot for Teams is generally available today. And right now, and this required a little bit of clarification, it unfortunately is only available to enterprise customers requiring 300 users or more. It's going to be available for SMB, but there's no timeline. But anyway, exciting for large organizations. And the next bullet. Teams Rooms continues to be popular. Microsoft just reported 9 consecutive quarters of triple-digit revenue growth for Teams Rooms, even with the Teams Pro licensing required. So good for that. And Teams Premium has some traction. You got to pay a little bit more, but Microsoft doesn't break out the number of kind of licenses, but there's 10,000 paid customers.
Yeah, and that's customers as opposed to users, isn't it? So that's over 10,000 different organizations. So interesting. See, that's relatively quick for an add-on license.
Yeah, although it could be you just got one to try it out, right? And
it could be 10,000 users, one at each customer.
And Teams Premium is still a very eclectic grouping of features. It does include things like this advanced webinar capabilities that we use for this particular thing, but it also includes things like the advanced booking or virtual appointment things that may or may not apply to different organizations. But there's a quick overview of what's happening with Teams. And Tom, on the next slide, you're going to talk a little bit about what's happening with the new Teams, just at a high level.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and again, thanks to Ribbon for putting this together. It's great to see so many familiar faces in the roster as well. Someone in the chat just asked, "What is Copilot?" I feel like that is not a genuine question,
sarcasm?
But if you've missed everything about Copilot, it's Microsoft's AI tool for Microsoft 365. So yeah, we're here to talk about the new Teams client. So Microsoft called this Teams 2.1 in early testing. Now, as is Microsoft's marketing, we have Teams Classic, which is the current Windows and Mac client, and new Microsoft Teams, which is the newer client. So your IT team might know this as Teams 2.1. Microsoft will just call it the new Teams client. So it is generally available. So a few weeks ago, Microsoft decided that this was ready for mainstream users. So previously it's been in testing for quite a while, but now it is ready for users. How ready? Kevin and I will talk about in some of these tips. Depending on your Office apps channel, so depending on how you run your IT, with no admin intervention, users will start defaulting to this new app in the coming months. Admins can choose to control that should they want to, but all your users will be automatically upgraded to the new Teams by the end of March 2023. So like that sounds, 2024. That sounds like quite far away, but in IT terms, it's really not. It's going to be here soon. And there are some experience changes here that we'll talk about. So you need to be starting to think about how you get your users from old Teams to new Teams, and hopefully some of these tips will help you along the way. Microsoft's headline here is the new Teams client is 2 times faster and 50% less memory. There was a big effort put on performance here. So the old/classic Teams client, it was slow at times, to be fair. It's built on a technology called Electron, which can be a bit of a memory hog, and Microsoft added lots and lots of features over time. So a big focus was on performance and a new architecture that Microsoft can add to over time. But it also includes some new features, just some changes in behavior to improve the collaboration experience. So Kevin and I are going to spend some time going tip for tip here to share what we found. We've both been testing it for quite a long while and living with it, and some tips and also some changes and considerations when rolling it out to your users. Kevin, over to you.
So tip number 1. New Teams has some changes and improvements to the calendar, and then it's got a Meet app. Here's the thing. In the typical Microsoft fashion where they believe more is more, you've got lots of calendar views. You've got your Outlook calendar, your Teams calendar, your now new Outlook calendar if you choose the new Outlook, and your new Teams calendar. And if you click on the new Teams calendar, the key thing is it introduces a new view called the Agenda view, and that's shown on the right there. It's cool. I don't pick it very often because I forget to do it, but what I like about it is it shows all of what's happening, like as many as can fit. So like today and the next days, but it shows who scheduled the meeting and the key people that were invited. So now you got day view, which is just one day, unlike the Outlook day view where you can pick different amounts of days, and at least in the new Outlook. You got the work week, the week, and now you got agenda view. But the key tip here is, if you go to the next slide, it's really this new app. It's called the Meet app. Although it says it's only supported in the new Teams, it's like, at least in my testing, it works both in the old Teams and the new Teams. And this is going to be a constant kind of theme here, which is your experience may vary depending on what tenant and what ring you're on and how these roll out. But anyway, so the Meet app, you can go to, click on the 3 dots or add app and search for Meet. There is the most generic of icons. I don't know, like a video camera. But anyway, that is the Meet app. And if you basically launch that, add that Meet app to your left rail, your personal apps, and then if you go to the next slide, it provides, and this is pretty cool, it provides a single view of upcoming meetings, recent meetings, and quick access to meeting content. So if you ever want to continue the chat for the meeting, you can do that for all the kind of recent meetings, which is defined by Microsoft as what's happened in the past 30 days. You can see whatever content was shared. You can see the recording. If you have Teams Premium, you can see the intelligent recap, but you can also really quickly look at a transcript, but also continue the chat in kind of the group chat that was created for the meeting. So this is, I think, a great way to bring all of the meetings together. And I think we're seeing Microsoft create these effectively Teams apps, the People app, but this is the Meet app. And so that is tip number 1, the new Teams calendar, agenda view, and for sure install and use the Meet app.
Yeah, I'll give you that's a good one. And like, this is Microsoft finally bringing to fruition this idea of there's a meeting life cycle. There's before, during, and after.
That's
and
right.
The after conversation has been lacking really in old Teams. Like you could go find the meeting chat and find your notes, and Microsoft are trying to give us a space here to say, I know I had a meeting a couple of days ago. I need to dip back in and check what got discussed there, get the meeting recap or the intelligent meeting recap if you're premium, and like you say, maybe continue the conversation.
I have a question for you guys on this one. I'll jump ahead of the people asking in the chat. Is there a way to organize this? Can you organize the meetings so that you can find one later? Is it in calendar order? Look, I might stump the.
No, but you can. Okay, so you can filter. If you look, you can filter by keyword. Yeah. So you can filter it. So once again, it's all the meetings in the past 30, and it is in my belief, it's in like reverse chronological order, right? So in this case, you got today and then earlier ones below. And that's at the bottom, and at the top, it's, as you can see, it's up next. It's basically today into the future.
Yeah, you couldn't tag them or denote this one's more important than that one. You'd have to filter or find them by title. And as Kevin said, they're in date and time order. Good question. Awesome. So my first tip is creating tasks from meetings. From messages. So this, I think, is a killer feature, and it's got way better in the Teams 2.1 client. So something we've actually lost in Teams 2.1 is the ability to save a message, so essentially to bookmark it. So if you're using, or from the old client, there was an option to save a message, and then there was a view to go and find all your saved messages. So that is how in old Teams I used to remember certain messages. So I got an action, I would save it, and I would later review my saved messages. This experience is much, much better. So what's happening here on the screen is I've got a message in from Lindsay. I can click the 3 dots on the message and I can create a task out of it. Now, the benefit of this is it's creating a task for me in Microsoft To Do, which spans the Teams client, the Outlook client, and Microsoft To Do. So wherever I add a task, either in To Do, in Outlook, or in Teams, they all end up in that one experience, which is unusual for Microsoft because normally they would have 3 options with 3 disparate lists, but they've actually brought the world together, which is quite nice. And you can see here, as the task gets added, I get the details from the message, and I also get a link to take me back to the message. So sometimes in Teams, you'll get a message and you need to reply to it with a more detailed reply, but you can't reply right now. This is a great way to create a task, say, jump back to that later and give it an intelligent reply, or reference that thread to ensure I actually do that task. So I would strongly encourage you to, if you don't already have a To Do app type experience, look at Microsoft To Do. And if you're going to use Teams heavily, then certainly putting your tasks into that single list across email and Teams makes life a lot easier.
Okay, now when I look at the slide deck, Tom, you have a second tip, number 2. So this is, I don't know, this is...
Yeah, well, this is...
I think you're already disqualified. So there you go. Well, but go for it. Tip number 2 again.
This is just to note that the saved messages is gone. So if you're using current Teams, and this is, you're going to need to use a comms on this. This is one of the tips where, like, you need to know that a feature has changed with new Teams. So it's not, Microsoft will talk about feature parity, but actually saved messages is gone. And they are favoring the tasks. They do say they'll bring back a similar saved message in the future, but who knows when. So I would encourage you to look at tasks rather than saving messages.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like things like present status alert changes, that's gone as well. And they're not bringing it back because they say their telemetry tells them nobody used it. So some things you are losing. And then if we go to the next slide, I think this is in that same... It's both a Halloween, happy post-Halloween. Hopefully everybody didn't eat too much candy. Here's one of the things. Last time I talked about the slash commands and my favorite ones, but the slash commands in the new Teams get slashed. So if you look at that search bar that's at the top of the classic Teams versus new Teams, when you click into it, you'll see that it would say look for messages, files, and more, or type slash for a list of commands. Obviously in Teams, maybe telemetry tells Microsoft people aren't using these. When you click into it, it says look for people, messages, files, and more. It doesn't even tell you to use a slash. You still can. And so if we click, what you'll see is there was this long list. This is the whatever, classic Teams. I said my favorite commands, which I talked about and I think got highly voted, were slash do not disturb, slash go to, which was great. It jumped directly to a team or channel, slash test call, and slash what's new. Of those, only one survived. So click again, Tom. So this is the much shorter list, at least right now in the new Teams, which is really about only pretty much setting your status, a lot of those stayed, so slash do not disturb, and then you can call somebody or chat with somebody. So certainly a tip is the slash commands are getting slashed, but once again, maybe people didn't know about them. So that's tip number 3.
That's a really good one. And this is where we're trying to bring you the detail of not just all the Microsoft marketing good news, but they'll call this the same, but it's not quite the same. Someone in the chat there said they only use find. So find has gone as a / command. So stay tuned for a tip on finding things. But yeah, really good one to note that your users who use these might find that they're missing that experience now.
I like the sad face in the chat.
Yeah.
So go to tip number 4.
Yeah, this is the headline one, I think, for Teams 2.1/new Teams. A lot of us work across multiple tenants. So consultants that have second, third, or even fourth accounts on different customers. If you use guest access for external collaboration, so you live in your tenant primarily, but you flip over to the Ribbon tenant when you're collaborating with Ribbon, or a number of customers live in a multi-tenant environment, particularly through mergers and acquisitions, they will have multiple tenants. Teams, classic Teams, has not had a great experience there. You had to essentially switch between tenants, and it would completely sign out of the experience and then completely re-sign in the experience. And you're talking at best 10 seconds to at worst, 30 seconds. It wasn't really usable. And you would miss messages between tenants because you got a message on the guest tenant or the second tenant or the customer account, and you wouldn't see it. This is a radical improvement. So here in the video, you'll see, and literally in the speed of that click, I have switched tenants to a secondary tenant. A little bonus tip there, you get that blocker if someone new sends you a message. So that's Lindsay sending a message to me on a secondary tenant, and that was how quick I got from one tenant to the other. Here now, I'll switch to a guest tenant. So I'm going from my primary tenant to a guest tenant. Again, you'll see that very fast. I'm now in guest tenant. And in a second, I'll flip back to my primary tenant again. So this is a real, for the people that live in either a multi-tenant environment or do a lot of collaboration cross-tenant, this is a massive improvement in experience. You no longer lose visibility of messages coming into you on your second or third or fourth account. You no longer lose the ability to join meetings in the preferred tenants because it will switch during a meeting join. And certainly I think there's probably a few people on here who consult or work with customers. If you have customer accounts, not only can you tenant switch as a guest, you can literally sign those multiple accounts in. You see here, I've got my Empowering Cloud and my Tom Arbuthnot. Those are both signed in. They both work in the same way, and we can switch between those two accounts pretty much seamlessly.
Yeah, so this is a great tip, and I feel we let you do it because you lost the first time. So remember, I think when you're voting, I'm not sure if you're supposed to vote on what the best feature is or the best tip that you didn't know about. Because as you said, this is definitely, to be fair, this is a headline thing, and maybe one of the most significant reasons, or perhaps the only reason, to use new Teams for many people, especially, as you say, like us consultants, right?
And have you found that it lived up to the hype, Kevin? I know you work with multiple customers. Do you, just to give another perspective, does it work as fast for you as we're seeing in this test?
Yeah, no, it definitely, it definitely does. And I think you captured this video and you didn't edit it and didn't have delays or whatever. It is very fast, and the notifications across tenants, it's much better. And I think Teams has never been the best platform for getting people externally. I think Zoom and WebEx, they have a simpler way. I just came back from WebEx 1 in Anaheim, and I think Microsoft built it on top of Azure Active Directory and whatever, and it's been challenging for them to have these kind of multiple identities. But I think finally it's fast, and this one works as described. I'm not sure I'm always seeing the 50% speed up in other performance areas, but this one, they did a great job. And I think with that, we're going to just turn it over to Greg for a few seconds.
Yes, but before we do that, I'm going to take advantage of this little break because we've had some great chat questions. And I think one that really maybe comes back because not everyone probably spends their day reading Microsoft's literature, as hard as that might be for the two of you to believe. I think some people might be a little confused about how they tell whether they can get the new Teams. And I'll speak personally here at Ribbon. our IT department hasn't enabled it yet and that's going to be a common thing that many of you are going to probably face, which is the IT people don't want to necessarily take calls from the help desk. So they'll slide this a little forward and hope that some of the issues are worked out before they enable it. But I think the thing to understand about whether or not you have the new Teams UI or not is there's a little slider button in the upper left of your client. If you don't have a little slider button that offers you the ability to change client types, then you don't yet have the new version of Teams. But as Tom pointed out, everybody eventually is going to get this, we'll call it opportunity, when probably by the first quarter of 2024. I would assume most customers will probably start thinking about doing that in January and February if they're not doing it right away.
Yeah, just to visualize that slider, this is what it looks like. So you'll see this slider, and when you flip it, you're in new Teams mode and you can flip back. Your admin may control that. As Greg says, Ribbon may have chosen to hide it for a while until they've finished their testing. If your admins do nothing, this will start to appear and you'll still stay on classic Teams. And at some point, Microsoft will proactively switch that depending on which update channel you're on.
Yeah, and on my own, people are pinging me about this. So I'm glad to see my Ribbon peers are watching. So let's talk for a second about who Ribbon is and why we chose to get these two gentlemen to help you learn a little bit more about it. And if you could just go to the next slide.
Sure.
Ribbon is really focused on enabling individuals to enable Teams Phone. So as Kevin mentioned earlier, I think there's 320 million Teams users, but only about 17 million of those people today are using Teams as a replacement for their Office PBX. And here at Ribbon, I use it every day. And the great thing about connecting business phone services into Teams is it basically gives you one client, both desktop, mobile, and you can have a traditional telephone as well, where you get all of your UC services. And where Ribbon fits into this is we build something called session border controllers. The easiest way to think of it is it's a firewall designed really focused on voice. And as part of the Teams deployment, Microsoft encourages customers to have a session border controller that goes between a traditional telecom provider, the AT&T, BT, Verizon, pick your company, and the Teams cloud. And that session border controller handles security the way you might think of a voice firewall, but it also does other things. It can encrypt the traffic if you need that done. It can manage interoperability. Sometimes SIP, which is the protocol that runs across those environments, isn't always standard between vendors. So we can tweak the knobs to make things work better. And then the other piece that's really important is we can enable things like existing SIP and analog devices, because oftentimes when customers are thinking about moving their traditional PBX office telephone system environment to Teams, they still have things like elevator phones and door phones and lobby phones and weird bells and paging systems, and they need to figure out how to make all that stuff work with a cloud service. And so Ribbon SBCs can be deployed as hardware, as software, or as cloud services, and we can enable people to integrate all of those important legacy pieces. It may not be the most important part of your phone deployment, but some of those little things keep everybody working and makes it easy for everyone to continue doing their job, even as you transition from old technology to new. And then if you bounce to the next slide, Tom, as important as that is for any individual business, it gets even more complicated when you start managing multi-site, multi-vendor, mixed deployments. We have customers deployed Microsoft Teams with just 100 or 50 users, but we also have somebody with 600,000 users. We can really help those very large customers who have complicated deployment environments, because it's straightforward to plan a simple migration. You might be able to do that over a weekend. When you start talking about tens or hundreds of sites, it takes a lot of work and a lot of detail to make sure that you don't break things as you move forward. So Ruben has a lot of experience with that. And as a matter of fact, I'll put a plug in. Kevin and I are going to be doing a webinar specifically on that topic in just a few weeks in early December. We're going to have a 2-part webinar series. So look for an invite for that, and you can even learn more about that. And I'll stop talking now and turn it back over to Kevin to get involved in the next team's tip.
Okay, for those of you keeping track, tip number 5. Now, this was called keyboard chaos. I like alliteration. And then I felt that's being too negative. So I just wanted to start out by saying keyboard Kai. This is my husky, my Siberian husky.
This is nice. This is shameless going for
no, but this was because I didn't want to be, my last one was the slashing slash commands. I feel like 2 of my tips are like things that you're losing. And if you go to the next slide, here's the thing.
Kevin, I just got to stop you. If you put the dog in another one of my presentations, I might have to actually get him his own contract.
It's true. The fees go up. There you go. We work them in. So but I'm going to say it's a little bit of keyboard chaos because, okay, so there used to be a slash keys command, but that was one of the slash commands that got slash. Now you can pick keyboard shortcuts from the triple dots, ellipsis in the upper right. When you do that, you see they're mostly the same. They're missing some. They're missing listing sums. For example, Control F, which is find, which was one of my great slash find commands last time. And I think Tom's going to take it as a tip for him this time. But anyway, that isn't listed, but it still works. There's some new ones, like some Alt-Shift left and right arrow stuff, like for shared content. You can move it and pan and whatever. And then if you scroll to the bottom, there's a whole bunch of debug ones, which are like Alt-Shift Control and then some numbers. Now, they don't work for me, so I don't know. Maybe, Tom, you understand. I think you have to be in some debug mode. So here's the net is, it's a little bit confusing. And, now I'm not sure. I think power users probably know these. And then the other interesting thing is Control period, which is the key command to bring up the keyboard shortcuts. It brings up this, but in the new teams, it actually brings up, if you're in a post or a chat, it actually brings up more context-sensitive help, and it literally takes you to the link at the bottom of this page here that says Keyboard Shortcuts Help, where it breaks it down by context. So a little bit of different behavior. If you're using these and it doesn't work in new teams, then look at this list. If you haven't used them, I just say keep looking at this list, because I think Microsoft still is going to probably change some things around. And then that is a generally good idea. It's like, even if you're not a power user, I don't know, at least once a month, go to the settings menu, because new and improved settings keep showing up. And even I found some yesterday that referenced Copilot even before it was released. So I don't even know what the settings do, but same thing with keyboard commands. If you want to be a power user, keep checking in with some of these, and eventually maybe Microsoft will make them all work and list Control F, which does work. So that's tip number 5, keyboard chaos.
That's a good one. People that use keyboard shortcuts hate it when their shortcuts are moved or changed, right? Because that's muscle memory. If you've got people that use those, definitely worth educating on that.
No, absolutely.
So this is another one. So some of this does go back to Teams Classic, but the vast majority of it is only in Teams 2.1. So being honest, channel adoption has not been the highest in Teams. So we talk about those 320 million users, like that's a lot of meetings and a lot of chat. The true best way to collaborate in Teams is to have teams and channels, hence the namesake of the product. But it's quite a cultural shift to people to move from just chat, which they're used to, and meetings, which they're used to. The channels experience is much improved in Teams 2.1. And Kevin was getting at me earlier of having multiple slides for this tip. I feel like it's worth it. So first off, when you go into channels, you have an in this channel about information pane that gives you an idea of who's in the channel, an idea of what the channel's about, an idea of some of the options, find, settings. Now remember, this is channel level, so you can have different information for each channel, helping your users understand this is the right place to have this conversation, this is the right place to have that conversation, which is really useful. You also have the option, and for the power users on the call, you might have seen this change. You can have the recent posts and compose box either at the top, so you're starting a new thread at the very top, or you're starting a thread at the bottom. And the logic here was trying to separate how the chat experience works, where the reply is always at the bottom and the conversation is constantly scrolling, into a model where we think more in this experience has multiple chat threads about different topics, and I should be replying to the right thread. I'm sure we've all seen the experience in channels where someone thinks they're replying to a channel message, but they actually create a brand new thread, and you end up with this mess of half conversations. Microsoft have also put some effort into the compose box, so they've changed the layout of it. They've made the text options more, the formatting options more visible, and you can also set background images for individual threads to really highlight what the thread is about. You can also pop out conversations now and pin posts as well. And also when you go into an individual thread or conversation in channels, you click into it, you are focus viewed on that particular thread. So again, avoiding the confusion of there's multiple conversations in this channel, which one am I in? I click into the explicit conversation, put my reply in the right place, which I found in experience with customers has helped the kind of overload of there's all these channel conversations. Am I replying to a thread? Am I replying to a new message? Do I start a new thread? So I think Microsoft's done a good job here of improving that channel experience.
So your last one? Oh no, you got more.
No, last one. So you mentioned this. So the enhanced in-channel search experience as well. So last set of tips with me and Kevin, he showed you the find, which worked in chat. Now you can do find in channel. So Control F, or that button I showed you in the first slide, and this will just search that particular channel rather than searching the whole of Teams, which is really useful if you know there was a particular message about a particular conversation that was had in the right channel, but I can't find it.
Yeah, and I think some of that, at least in I've got classic Teams and new Teams, and I get a bunch of that, and certainly Control F even before let me find in a channel. So anyway, it's a bit blurry in terms of your experience may vary. And I see on the chat, people have new Teams and some of the things we're talking about. I don't know if it hasn't rolled out to their tenant. And I think that this is like, kudos to Microsoft for improving and moving things around. But at the same time, regular users who may not follow it as closely as Tom and I, as an IT pro, you're going to have to just recognize that moving things around, even if you're moving it to a more intuitive place, does create disruption for people who have figured out it. So I guess my message, I'm a big believer in terms of training and ongoing training. It certainly, as this new Teams rolls out through your organization, certainly, keep up the training. If you're in charge of more,
that's a really good point. It's a great opportunity to revive the training conversation. Like, even though it's not a radical shift in experience, it's a great opportunity to be like, you're getting a new client. Let's do a update/refresher on how to get the best out of this tool.
Yeah, and I think like even some of the tips like from before, the features that still are there, they may be new to your user base. So I think that's a great point. Yes, use this as an opportunity to go back and help people make the most out of Teams. Here's a little tip number 7 is a little bit of a fun one. This actually, I'm super impressed with Microsoft that they simplified something, right? Because this was the Zoom thing. Zoom always says it's just simple and it works. This is really nice. So there you see type a message, you've got like few icons. And one of the neat things is like, this is both a simplified chat and post bar. where there's less icons by default. And if you click there, Tom, so this, to remind you, this is the previous kind of post where you had a zillion icons, right? And ones that you don't even know necessarily what they are. By default, and if you go to the next slide, what you do is for, this is great, you click on the smiley face and then click there, Tom, to go to the next build. And what is like now they've consolidated. These used to be 3 separate icons for emojis and GIFs and stickers. And so now what I think is nice about this, and I think using these helps create a bonding experience, especially for remote people. If you type something, it now searches across emojis and GIFs and stickers. So whatever you type there, they've consolidated that and simplified that. This is granted, this isn't going to necessarily make you more productive, but I like the approach that Microsoft is simplifying the user interface, as well as just making it easier to access all of these. So that's tip number 7 from me.
Yeah, that's a good one. You're right. Those were all previously different buttons, and like the users like get the difference between GIFs and stickers. They're all just images I throw in for emotion. So I like bringing that all into one experience. That's good.
And over to you.
Yeah, number 8 for me is filter and search. These have been improved in new teams. So we had the battle in the chat around is /find quicker or slower than the keyboard shortcut Control F. I'll say your typical users, your non-power users, are not doing / commands or keyboard shortcuts, right? So for those typical users, we've got a nice experience now here in the top search bar, which is partly the search service improving and partly Teams 2.1 getting better. But as the video cycles round here, you can see in the top search bar, I can search for people, I can search for channels, I can search for files all in one place, and it will do some rudimentary intelligence. So if I search for Kevin, it's saying, here's Kevin, the possible contact, but here's a file you co-edited with Kevin, which is really useful. And also I show in this rolling video that ability to search or in a particular chat or a particular channel. So again, being able to filter down, because Teams gets very busy if you use it heavily. We run everything on Teams. There's a lot going on in there. That top level search is okay for like, I want to narrow things down, but sometimes you're better off starting in the right place and narrowing down from there. The filter call out is filter. I have seen users get confused and try and search in. Filter is just narrowing down your visual view of which channels or chats are available. So I filter here for Kevin. That's not finding Kevin as a contact. That's filtering the chats by the subject name of the chat, or filtering the teams and channels by the name of the channels. So make sure your users understand where they might best use filter to narrow down to find the right conversational place, and how they can really make the most of that kind of universal search in the top bar there between people, files, teams, channels, and messages.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. I'm going to give a bonus tip number 9. But if you, for example, and you didn't show it in the video, if you search for teams and channels or search for something, when you hit enter there, then you get some additional ability to restrict it by date range, which actually was part of my tip from the last round. The other thing that I pointed out last time, and I just want to share, is for people search, it is also Soundex. So it's a phonetic search. My business partner, Dino Caputo, his last name starts with a C, but if you think it's K-A-P, it'll actually still find it. So they brought that Soundex, so you don't have to actually know how to, spell a contact's name, which is kudos with a K to Microsoft. Although if you spelled it with a C, it would still find kudos. So there you go. Bonus tip number 9.
That probably applies to all 3 of our last names, if you think about it.
Yeah, that's true, right? You get Keeler, doesn't get spelled right, to Zweig, and Arbuthnot is more, you can more sound a few letters, so there you go.
Might get a K in there.
Nobody's got a chance with Arbuthnot.
Okay,
all right.
So I guess it's time to vote. So is this Lindsay? Does she bring up the poll?
Yeah, Lindsay's gonna put up the polls. No, don't let any biases around beautiful dogs bias your voting.
Or the
here.
most slides. Just because Tom used 100 slides for one tip,
Yeah,
it's
we hope,
it's quality, not quantity. So there you go.
we hope we've helped you discover some new things around Teams 2.1 and answer some of your questions here as well. And yeah, it's been great to see so many people stay for the entire duration. So thanks for that. Thanks for all the great chat messages as well. I've been trying to reply as presenting, which is always a challenge, but there were some great comments from people in the chat. I appreciate that.
Even polls is annoying to do this, right? Like there's a lot of people that don't know you can put polls inside. So there you go. This is a good opportunity to show off this feature.
Yeah, I think one thing that really you both pointed out and people made comments about is I actually think this is a big challenge for IT departments. And I understand why they will be cautious about enabling this because while probably a good chunk of the people who are on this, we enjoy sort of learning how all of these things work. We're curious people. I think for a lot of rank and file people, there'll be a significant time of confusion and people don't always like change. So that'll mean that help desks will be busy answering basic questions for quite a chunk of time. So I think about when we've had big changes to Word and PowerPoint over the years. I'm sadly old enough to remember some of those big swings. And I remember how many IT organizations really struggled to get those things deployed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You want to get in front of this conversation with the users and make it internally sell them on the benefits and the experience before they just see their buttons move around and have that natural friction that a lot of people have to change.
Yeah, ideally you want to get your kind of amongst your work teams, you want to have the kind of that subject matter expert, and there's always one in every little group to have adopted it first, so the laggards can find somebody locally to call and ask basic questions like, why can't I get the calendar to work?
But I'm excited just with this Copilot release. I'm excited for if that allows people to actually unlock more of these features. Nicole Herskowitz talks about 570 new features that have been released for Teams in the past year. It's hard to keep up to date with those, but maybe with Copilot, and I guess we'll see starting today, maybe it allows people to say, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to run a poll inside of a Teams meeting. And maybe Copilot and artificial intelligence will help unlock the value for some of these features. Like, that's what I'm hopeful for. I don't know, Tom, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to do with getting the most value out of these tools, and AI should be one of those technologies that actually helps us drive value. Even beyond Teams, things like Excel and PowerPoint. Who knows? Oh, Greg knows how to drive PowerPoint, but I definitely don't. Making the most of those tools, AI should really help us there. Let's have a look.
So
yeah,
I'm seeing 3 at 25%. So I'm seeing
it just teetered down. I wonder if it changes as people leave the meeting.
seeing the first 3 tips basically as everyone's favorite.
Oh, see, I'm seeing that Tom won by 1%. I don't know. Maybe this is legislation.
Well,
I don't know. I'm going to say
we'll
based on
take it to the Supreme Court for a decision.
Yeah, I think I'm going to concede and say that Tom, because I see my first one has 25%, but I see that next two that Tom put forth 26%. So I will concede that Tom is the winner of this fun tips and tricks number 2.
Yeah, I think this is really just a veiled attempt to get Ribbon to sponsor the third one. You can have a tiebreaker.
I don't know. They seem good. So there you go. Greg is delivering the box of votes. We have to see what are they. Yeah, there you go.
Well, let me wrap it up by thanking everybody for their time. And just a reminder, if you joined us a minute or two late, we absolutely recorded this. We will send out the link. And you're also going to be able to share this with friends and family. And it is applicable to anyone really who's curious about this. So thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kevin, for taking the time to put this together. And we hope that everyone enjoyed it. And as we said, look for an email from us and you'll be easily able to send it to anyone.
Yeah, no, thanks everybody, and thanks Greg and Ribbon for bringing us together for this battle. It does sound like we're having a part 3, Kevin. So we'll have to think up some even more tips. Maybe it'll be Copilot tips next time.
Well, maybe I think a few Teams phone tips to help out our poor sponsor over here.
Oh, there you go.
Phone we can
Thank you,
definitely
Greg.
do.
This is I think this is a great idea. It's a unique form of kind of this friendly competition. Thanks to you and for Ribbon for sponsoring it, and thanks for everybody that took the time. And we're so participative in the chat. This is
Yeah,
fantastic. I
great
love
chat.
the
Thank you,
engagement.
everybody.
Enjoy
Great.
the rest
All right.
of your day.